Welcome to Twilight Tale, a quiet place where history slows down and time begins to drift. Tonight, we journey along a road once traveled in whispers, a road of silk and sand, of lantern light and distant stars. As caravans move gently through sleeping deserts and forgotten ancient empires fade into the twilight, their footsteps echo softly through time. This is the Silent Silk Road, a story of serene journeys, peaceful exchanges, and civilizations now resting beneath the dust of centuries. Find a comfortable place to rest, let your breathing slow, and allow the world to soften around you. As we begin our calm passage through history for sleep. It is said that some roads do not begin where the earth is cut by gates or guarded by stone. Some roads awaken only when the world grows quiet, when the sun releases its hold and the sky leans closer to the ground. Under a moon thinned by time, a ribbon of dust stretches beyond sight. It does not rest upon the desert as other roads do. It rises and falls, inhaling and exhaling with the night, as though the land itself remembers how to move. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of stone and distance. Silence gathers here, not empty, not forgotten, but listening. This is the Silk Road. Not the line drawn in ink across parchment, not the route taught and measured. This road lives beneath those names. It is a passage of breath and memory, an unseen chamber where footsteps once softened the earth and prayers dissolved into the wind. If one lingers long enough, it is said, the stars feel closer here, as though they once bent down to observe those who dared to pass beneath them. Who walked this road when the night was deeper and the heavens felt nearer? What did they carry within their chests, folded more carefully than silk? The road offers no answer. It only breathes. From the edges of the darkness, movement gathers slowly. Shapes form without urgency, like constellations remembering themselves. Caravans emerge in silence, camels swaying with ancient patience, their shadows stretching long across the sand. Bells murmur softly, not to announce arrival, but to keep time with the heart of the earth. Bundles are set down. Silk rests beside salt. Jade leans against glass. Spices share space with stories. Each parcel holds more than its weight, each one a vessel of hope, risk, devotion. Trade here is not mere exchange. It is offering. It is trust laid gently into another's hands. Some believe that every journey along this road was a kind of ritual, each departure a quiet surrender to uncertainty. Travelers did not move to conquer distance, but to be changed by it. From the Far East came paper that learned how to hold thought, ink that learned how to breathe. From the heartlands of Persia came fire kept alive by faith, geometry shaped like prayer. From distant western shores came coins stamped with emperors whose names were already loosening from memory. These things passed through countless hands, softened by touch, altered by intention. Yet the road belonged fully to none of them. It flowed between empires like a hidden vein, indifferent to borders, unmoved by crowns. It welcomed all who stepped upon it, erased many who tried to claim it, and remembered only what could not be spoken aloud. Whispers tell us of monks who walked barefoot beneath their robes, sutras hidden close to the skin, words meant to cross mountains without noise. They followed not certainty, but trust, guided by stars that felt less like lights and more like teachers. Others speak of merchants who guarded their paths not with maps, but with silence, knowledge passed from mouth to ear, breath to breath. A bend in the road where one must turn, a well concealed by stone and shadow, a shrine where one must stop, even if time insists otherwise. The Silk Road was never a single path. It was a living idea, braided and unbraided by wind and time. At night, campfires bloomed like grounded stars. Around them, languages softened, gestures replaced grammar, shared food dissolved suspicion. In those hours, connection required no negotiation. It was simply felt. Beneath the silence, exchange became communion. Time moved differently here. Days unfolded like cloth slowly revealed. Weeks dissolved into wind. Years passed unnoticed, leaving only impressions. Footprints erased by dawn. Names thinned by repetition until they vanished entirely. Contradictions lived easily along this road. It promised connection, yet erased faces. It carried knowledge, yet devoured authors. It bound civilizations together, yet left no single voice behind. Where memory fades, mystery takes root. There is no complete record of all who walked here, no final archive of songs sung to keep fear at bay, no ledger of vows whispered beneath unfamiliar stars. These things were entrusted to the wind, and the wind keeps no books. Ruins remain, watchtowers swallowed by sand, monasteries carved into cliffs like held breath. Their walls bear symbols now unreadable, spirals, stars, marks made by the moon. When touched, the stone feels warm, as though remembering hands long gone. Some nights, it is said, the road hums, not loudly, only enough to be felt in the bones. The deeper one drifts into the memory of the Silk Road, the less solid it becomes. It begins to resemble a dream shared by many sleepers, each recalling it differently, yet certain it mattered. Empires rose beside it, hardened, then fell away. Dynasties turned to dust. Religions flowed outward like ripples, carrying compassion and law, fire and surrender. The road absorbed them all, asking nothing in return.
Even shadow traveled this way, unseen and uninvited, a reminder that connection carries both light and weight. Yet history rarely lingers there. It moves on, eager for names and triumphs. The Silk Road remains uninterested in such things. It remembers instead the pause before dawn, the moment a traveler exhaled, unsure but committed, the way the desert listens without judgment. Perhaps this is why it resists being fully known, why every attempt to define it dissolves into fragments. Maps show routes, but not meaning. Dates mark eras, but not feeling. Perhaps the truth is quieter. Perhaps the Silk Road was never meant to be remembered, only felt. Now the caravans thin, their bells soften, then fall silent. One by one, the silhouettes dissolve back into the night, as though they were never separate from it at all. The fires dim, leaving embers, small red hearts blinking against the dark. Wind smooths the sand where footsteps once insisted on being seen. Above, the stars continue their slow turning, indifferent and intimate all at once. The road remains, still breathing beneath the earth, still waiting without expectation. Perhaps it was never meant to offer answers. Perhaps it exists only to remind us that movement itself can be sacred. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some paths appear only when we slow enough to feel them beneath our feet. And as sleep draws near, the Silk Road fades, not into forgetting, but into something gentler, an echo beneath our own quiet paths, a reminder that we too carry unseen cargo, breath, memory, silence, and the road goes on. It is said that some cities do not rise from stone alone, but from longing. They appear first as a question carried by the wind, and only later as walls and gates. At the edge of dawn, where the desert loosens its grip on night, a city emerges from dust the color of old embers. Its walls glow softly, not with fire, but with memory, as if they once burned with the weight of countless arrivals and have never fully cooled. This is Samarkand. We do not approach it through dates or dynasties, but through wonder. How many lives passed through these gates and were never held by time? How many names dissolved into the air between one step and the next? The city does not answer, it receives. Arches rise before us, carved with stars and verses, whose meanings drift just beyond understanding. The stone seems to breathe. Patterns spiral inward, inviting the eye to wander and forget where it began. It is said that every traveler who entered Samarkand arrived carrying two burdens, what they meant to trade and what they were willing to leave behind. Within the walls, courtyards open like quiet lungs. Shadows rest here as if in prayer, pooling beneath tiled domes and along colonnades, smoothed by centuries of touch. Fountains murmur softly, their voices worn thin by repetition. Even in stillness, the city listens. Samarkand is not a destination, it is a threshold. Languages once braided here, then loosened, then vanished. Words spoken in the morning were forgotten by nightfall, replaced by others just as fragile. The air carried accents from distant mountains, from river valleys, from shores no one in the city would ever see. Yet for a moment, all were held together beneath the same sky. Some believe the city learned its patience from this constant motion. It does not cling, it allows. Beneath the silence, deeper currents hum. In secluded chambers, astronomers once lifted their eyes from the earth and traced the slow breathing of the heavens. Stars were mapped not to conquer the sky, but to understand one's place beneath it. Circles were drawn, tables aligned. Time itself was measured in shadows and light. Scrolls lay guarded in cool rooms, their edges fragile as dried leaves. Knowledge passed hand to hand, often without names attached. The words mattered more than those who carried them. Scholars came and went, leaving behind questions rather than monuments. Some truths were never meant to stay. Pilgrims crossed Samarkand bearing inner maps more precious than gold. Their journeys were written not on parchment, but in breath and ache and devotion. They paused at the same gates as merchants and soldiers, yet they listened for something else, a silence that spoke only when one was empty enough to hear it. The city listened with them. Yet Samarkand was never untouched by force. Conquests came like sudden storms, reshaping walls, breaking towers, renaming streets. Rulers rose with banners and certainty, only to sink back into dust. Empires claimed the city as eternal, even as they rebuilt it in their own image, stone by stone. There is a contradiction at the heart of Samarkand. It is famed as eternal, yet it is always being remade. What endures here is not form, but rhythm. Memory slips through fingers like sand, rearranging itself with every passing century. Where memory fades, something quieter remains. Tiles crack and are replaced. Domes collapse and rise again. Names once spoken with reference thin into whispers, then vanish entirely. And still the city holds its gates open. It is said that Samarkand does not belong to those who ruled it, nor to those who studied it, nor even to those who loved it. It belongs to those who passed through and did not try to stay. to those who accepted impermanence as instruction. As evening deepens, the color drains gently from the sky. Dusk settles into the courtyards, softening edges, forgiving imperfections. The city exhales. Lamps glow like grounded stars. The noise of the day dissolves into footfalls and distant echoes.
The gates stand open. They have no names now. They do not need them. Stone has learned that names are temporary, but passage is constant. The arches wait with infinite patience, marked by the moon, worn smooth by centuries of leaving. Perhaps Samarkand survives not in its walls or its domes, but in the silence between footsteps, in the moment just before departure, when the traveler looks back once, knowing they will never return the same. Some places exist only to be crossed, not held. Some cities teach us that to pass through is itself a kind of devotion. And as night closes its hand around the last traces of color, Samarkand remains, listening, breathing, unchanged in its willingness to let go. Perhaps it was never meant to be possessed. Perhaps it was only meant to be remembered quietly, like a prayer spoken once and released. Some voices echo only when we are ready to listen, and the city waits.
It is said that before there were cities, before walls learned how to stand, there was the desert, vast, pale, and listening. Under a sky crowded with stars, dunes unfold like folded breath, rising and sinking in slow devotion to the night. No road marks this place, no stone declares passage, and yet this is the Silk Road. Here it exists not as a line, but as an absence. The question drifts gently across the sand, carried by wind too soft to disturb the surface. What voices linger where no walls remain? What prayers echo where nothing stands long enough to remember a name? The desert does not answer quickly. It has learned patience from eternity. Beneath the silence, the land remembers every crossing. Shadows begin to move where the starlight thins. Caravans advance slowly, almost hesitantly, as though asking permission with each step. Camels sway in quiet rhythm, their silhouettes stretched thin across the dunes. The sound of bells is muted here, softened by awareness. In this place, even breath feels loud. The desert becomes a chamber of listening. Traders speak softly, not out of fear, but respect. Sound travels far in silence, and words once released cannot be taken back. Each traveler knows this land is not empty, it is attentive. The sand shifts subtly, rearranging itself around their steps, as if recording the weight of each footfall. Before departure, rituals are observed without haste. Small offerings are pressed into the earth, water poured sparingly, grain scattered, names whispered and released. Some believe unseen guardians move with the wind, neither benevolent nor cruel, only watchful. Others say the desert itself is alive, older than gods, patient beyond understanding. Every step forward is both risk and prayer. The Silk Road here teaches humility. There are no walls to shelter certainty, no towers to reassure the lost. Direction is held not by stone, but by stars, and stars are known to wander. Travelers lift their eyes often, tracing patterns that shift without warning. What guided yesterday may mislead tomorrow. Whispers tell us of cities that once rose here, luminous and brief, markets where voices overlapped like woven cloth, wells that sang when first uncovered. Then one morning, nothing. Sand smoothed the ground. Wind sealed the memory. By dusk, even the rumor was gone. Lost cities are not mourned here. They are accepted. Some believe the desert devours all things. Others know it purifies. Both are true. It erases names, yet preserves echoes. It strips away what clings too tightly,
leaving only what is essential. Those who cross it emerge altered, even if they cannot say how. Beneath the silence, stories surface. There are tales of wells that appear at twilight and vanish by dawn, leaving no trace but dampness and doubt. Of travelers guided by a single star that refused to be named, leading them safely one night, abandoning them the next. Of bones uncovered by storms, arranged gently as if laid to rest by the wind itself. Contradiction breathes fusily here. The desert is feared as devouring, revered as cleansing. It destroys without malice and preserves without intention. It does not choose sides. It simply remains. The caravans continue, slow and deliberate. Time loosens its grip. Days stretch thin. Nights deepen. Conversations fade into gestures. Gestures fade into shared silence. Even memory begins to simplify itself, shedding excess. In this place, all journeys grow alike. Empires once depended on these crossings. Silk, spice, salt, and scripture moved invisibly through this emptiness, binding distant worlds together. Yet the desert remembers none of their borders. It recalls only movement, the rhythm of leaving and arriving, the pause between breaths. Where memory fades, equality begins. As night deepens, the caravans thin. One by one, shadows dissolve into the dark, bells quiet, footprints soften, then vanish entirely. The desert smooths itself, restoring the surface as if nothing had passed. Only wind remains. It traces familiar paths with invisible fingers, repeating motions older than trade, older than language. If one listens closely, truly listens, it is said the wind carries fragments, not names, not stories, but feeling, resolve, longing, surrender. The desert does not forget, it simply chooses when to speak. Perhaps it was never meant to be conquered or understood. Perhaps its purpose is gentler, to remind all who cross that permanence is an illusion and passage itself is sacred. In its silence, all journeys become equal. In its vastness, all names return to dust. And beneath the stars, the Silk Road breathes on, unmarked, unseen, endlessly listening. It is said that before words were bound into books, before knowledge learned how to stand upright on shelves, it traveled as breath. It moved quietly, carried by hands that trembled with care, by minds that understood the danger and the gift of remembering. In a dim room lit only by oil lamps, thin sheets of paper rest like sleeping wings. Their edges curl softly, responding to warmth, to time, to the presence of watching silence. This is where our listening begins. The written word lies before us, not as an object of certainty, but as a fragile vessel. Ink rests upon fiber, dark and deliberate, holding thoughts that once crossed deserts, mountains, and borders that no longer exist. Curiosity awakens gently here, not around power or conquest, but around something more vulnerable, meaning on the move. Beneath the silence, the Silk Road breathes through paper. Some believe that manuscripts carry more than language. They absorb the rhythm of the place where they were written, the intention of the hand that shaped each stroke, the pauses where doubt lingered. In forgotten corners of the earth, sutras, letters, and maps were folded carefully and pressed close to the body, as if warmth itself might preserve them. The journey of words was never loud. In mountain monasteries, scribes worked before dawn, when the air was still and the mind less divided. Brushes touched paper with reverence.
Each character formed slowly, as though asking permission to exist. Ink was not rushed. Mistakes were not erased easily. To write was to commit. To truth, to patience, to imperfection.
Paper, newly learned and carefully guarded, became a sacred skin. It absorbed ink the way earth absorbs rain, without judgment. It held prayers without demanding belief. It carried questions without offering answers. It was light enough to travel, yet strong enough to endure. Along the Silk Road, knowledge moved quietly. Buddhist texts were folded into robes, pressed against the chest, so the heart might learn them first. Medical wisdom passed from one healer to another in half-whispered phrases, adjusted gently for climate, for culture, for need. Remedies changed names as they crossed borders, but their purpose remained: to ease suffering, to restore balance. Maps were drawn not from measurement alone, but from memory. Rivers curved where fear once lingered. Mountains grew taller where loss had slowed the journey. Empty spaces were left deliberately blank, not from ignorance, but respect. Some distances were not meant to be fixed. Merchant homes became temporary libraries. A letter read by lamplight was folded again and sent onward, carrying fingerprints, oil stains, and the weight of unspoken emotion. Words meant for one reader often found many, meaning scattered like seeds. Whispers tell us that no text crossed the Silk Road unchanged. As words moved from tongue to tongue, from script to script, they softened or sharpened. A metaphor in one language became a command in another. A prayer lost its rhythm, but gained new depth. Truth bent, not always broken, but reshaped by the hands that received it. Here lies the quiet contradiction. Writing was meant to preserve, yet it also obscured. To fix meaning in ink was to invite transformation. What survived did so by adapting. What refused to change often vanished. Some knowledge was guarded fiercely, scrolls hidden behind walls, accessible only to those initiated through silence and service. Other teachings were allowed to fade intentionally, released back into breath and memory, deemed too powerful or too fragile to remain bound. Ink, exposed to sun and wind, learned how to disappear. Where memory fades, mystery grows. There are texts we know only by reference, names of books that no longer exist, described in margins or footnotes by those who once held them. There are philosophies reduced to fragments, equations without context, prayers without endings. The Silk Road remembers their passing, even if it no longer carries their form. As night deepens, the oil lamps dim. Shadows lengthen across the room. The pages respond, curling slightly, breathing as the air cools. Paper, like all travelers, grows weary. It is said that if one listens closely at this hour, the manuscripts speak, not in words, but in presence. They remind us that knowledge is not static. It is a journey, shaped by those willing to carry it. Perhaps the most sacred truths were never meant to arrive intact. Perhaps their holiness lies in their transformation, in how they learn to survive distance, misunderstanding, and time. Every word is a gate. Every reader, a silent traveler. The Silk Road closes its eyes. The ink rests. Meaning drifts gently, unclaimed. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that there are places where time loosens its grip, not because it is defeated, but because it is invited to rest. At twilight, when the sun lowers itself without ceremony and the sky turns the color of old copper, a bazaar opens its many eyes. Lamps flicker, fabric stirs, shadows lengthen like memories deciding whether to stay. This is the market of the Silk Road. We do not enter it through history, but through a question that hangs softly in the air. Can a place hold time still? Stalls stand half-lit, their colors muted like fading dreams, indigo worn thin, red softened by dust, gold dulled into warmth. The ground remembers countless feet, though no footprints remain. Sounds gather gently, the rustle of cloth, the faint clink of metal, the hush between words. The bazaar feels less like a location and more like a pause, a held breath between departures. Here, exchange was never only material. Beneath the silence, the market listens. Merchants stand beside their wares, hands steady, eyes patient. Scales sway gently, weighing more than spice or stone. Jade rests in open palms, warmed by countless hands before. Glass catches the last light of day, reflecting skies that belong to other lands entirely. Silk lies folded like water made solid, remembering looms and distant rain. Each object carries memory.
It is said that nothing entered the bazaar untouched by story. A piece of amber held sunlight from another age. A pouch of spice carried heat from far-off soil. Coins passed through so many lives that they forgot who first claimed them. To trade here was to accept the weight of unseen journeys. Bargaining unfolded like ritual, voices lowered, gestures precise. Trust moved quietly between strangers who might never meet again. A glance, a nod, a pause, these were currencies as real as silver. Some believed that every exchange altered fate slightly, shifting paths in ways no map could record. The market felt suspended, as though listening to centuries at once. Languages braided and dissolved. Words borrowed meaning from tone rather than grammar. What could not be said was often understood. In this place, silence was not absence, but participation. To stand quietly was to take part in the ceremony of movement. Whispers tell us that the bazaar had no true beginning and no final end. It appeared where roads crossed and vanished when they diverged. Empires fed upon its abundance, yet the market itself refused ownership. It belonged to no crown, no banner, only to the moment. Deeper within its rhythm, contradictions reveal themselves. Wealth passed endlessly through these stalls, yet few remained rich. Fortunes changed hands like water poured from vessel to vessel. Empires prospered, but individuals disappeared. Names were spoken once, then carried away by the next caravan's dust. The market thrived on movement, yet existed only in the present. It could not be inherited, nor preserved. To arrive too late was to miss it entirely. To stay too long was to watch it transform into something else. Where memory fades, the bazaar breathes. Many who entered left no trace beyond a brief echo of presence. A laugh remembered by no one. A deal struck and forgotten. A prayer whispered while waiting for dawn. The market did not keep records. It did not need to. Its purpose was not to remember, but to connect. As night deepens, the lamps grow softer. One by one, stalls close, not abruptly, but with reverence. Cloth is folded. Goods are covered. Hands linger for a moment longer than necessary, as if reluctant to release the day. The crowd thins. Footsteps soften. Conversations dissolve into the dark. And yet, the shape of the market remains. It lingers in the air like warmth after a flame is extinguished. Invisible pathways still cross where stalls once stood.
the silence holds the outline of voices. Time, it seems, has chosen to sleep here, not claimed by any single era, not bound to any one story. Perhaps that is why the bazaar endured, because it asked nothing to stay, because it allowed all things to pass through without insisting they remain. Exchange here was sacred precisely because it was fleeting. A meeting, a gesture, a moment shared before all things move on. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as the night settles fully, the market closes its eyes. Time exhales. The Silk Road carries on, leaving behind only the quiet knowledge that nothing truly belongs to us, not even the moment we stand within.
It is said that there are roads that do not lie upon the earth, but rise from it. Roads that climb slowly into thinner air, where breath becomes deliberate and silence grows vast. In forgotten corners of the world, a narrow mountain pass opens beneath towering stone. The cliffs lean inward, ancient and unmoving, as though guarding a secret too old for words. Above, the stars feel pinned close to the sky, sharp and attentive. A question is whispered here, not aloud, but within the chest. Who guards the roads that climb beyond breath? This is the high passage of the Silk Road, where earth and sky nearly touch, and where every step must be earned. The ascent begins without ceremony. There are no gates, no markers carved with certainty, only a path worn thin by centuries of cautious movement, pressed into rock and gravel by feet that trusted more than they knew. The air cools quickly, sound softens, even thought slows, as if the mountain itself asks for restraint. Travelers once moved here in silence, not from fear alone, but respect. Breath was precious, words were weight. Each pause became a negotiation between body and will. Below, valleys vanished into cloud and shadow. Above, peaks rose like frozen waves, their faces carved by wind older than memory. The mountains were never conquered, they were endured. Some believe these heights are ancient witnesses, sacred not because they protect, but because they remain. Empires passed beneath them, languages changed, faiths traveled and transformed. Yet the peaks watched without judgment, indifferent to banners and belief. Snow erased tracks as easily as it erased ambition. Beneath the silence, devotion took quiet forms. Offerings were left in cracks of stone, small tokens pressed into the earth and forgotten. Threads were tied to wind-worn posts, prayers fluttering until weather claimed them. Travelers bowed not to gods they could name, but to the presence itself. The belief lingered that the mountains listened more than they spoke, and that listening was enough. As the road climbed higher, myth gathered like mist. Whispers tell us of spirits that dwell where air thins, guardians of altitude who test resolve rather than grant favor, of caravans lost not to storms, but to certainty, of paths that shifted overnight, altered by snow and memory, refusing to remain where they had been the day before. Here, direction was never fixed. Stars guided, but even they seemed to move differently, distorted by height and exhaustion. What appeared close was distant. What seemed solid could vanish beneath fresh snow. The contradiction of the mountains reveals itself slowly. They protect and endanger in equal measure. They guide and mislead without intention. A sheltered pass could become a trap. A perilous ridge might offer safe passage. Nothing here was promised. Ambition grew quiet in these heights. Pride thinned with the air. The mountains erased excess with effortless patience, reminding all who crossed that survival required humility, not mastery. In forgotten tales, some travelers never descended. Their names dissolved into legend, their presence absorbed into stone and ice.
It is said the mountains remember them, not as loss, but as stillness added to stillness. Where memory fades, silence deepens. As the ascent nears its highest point, the road begins to pause, steps grow fewer, breath slows, the sky opens wider, and the stars burn with cold clarity. There is no triumph here, no sense of arrival, only a widening awareness of scale, how small the road is, how vast the listening above it. At the summit, the pass rests beneath the open night. Wind moves gently, carrying nothing it intends to keep. The earth feels closer to the sky than to the valleys below. Time seems uncertain, loosened, as if unsure whether to move forward or remain. Perhaps this is why these passages mattered, not because they offered answers, but because they removed them. In these heights, certainty thinned until only presence remained. Some truths, it is said, can only be approached slowly. Some understanding arrives not as knowledge, but as quiet. The road does not end here, it simply waits. And beneath the stars, marked by the moon, the mountain pass watches, patient, ancient, and silent, while all who cross are invited to listen. It is said that all roads, no matter how patient or long, eventually learn to listen for water. At the far edge of the Silk Road, where dust loosens its hold and the land exhales, moonlight trembles across a wide, breathing surface. The sea lies open and quiet, reflecting the sky as if trying to remember it. Ships rest along the shore like thoughts at the edge of sleep, anchored, yet already drifting. This is the port where rivers met the sea. We arrive not through triumph or conclusion, but through soft uncertainty. Here, the long journeys of land dissolve into waves. Footsteps end, oars wait. The Silk Road does not stop. It changes its voice. Whispers tell us that this place was never meant to hold travelers for long. It was a threshold, a place of loosening, a pause where hands released what they had carried, and hearts learned to face a wider horizon. The docks stretched gently into the water, darkened by age and salt. Lanterns sway with the tide, their reflections breaking and rejoining, unable to decide where the light truly lives. The air is scented with incense and brine, a mingling of prayer and departure. Crates are opened carefully. Silk, once folded against desert wind, is laid into wooden hulls. Spices breathe again. Scrolls wrapped in oilcloth wait to feel the roll of waves. Stories move here as quietly as cargo. Some believe that the sea listens more deeply than land, that it carries memory farther, dispersing it beyond borders and names. Where the desert remembers every crossing, the water remembers every letting go. Ships are not destinations. They are temporary homes, floating shelters between what was and what might be. Their clanks creak softly, learning the language of tide and current. Sails hang like pale lungs, ready to inhale wind from unseen places. Beneath the silence, rituals unfold. Before departure, offerings are lowered into the water. Flowers, grains, whispered names. The sea receives without promise. Some bow, some close their eyes. All understand that once the shore slips away, certainty does not follow. The port thrives on this knowing. Merchants watch the horizon with practiced stillness. They have learned not to cling. Goods arrive bearing the weight of continents and leave lighter, transformed by salt air and expectation. Coins pass hands, then disappear into pockets bound for elsewhere. Wealth circulates, but permanence does not. Here, hope and loss share the same breath. Many who sailed from this harbor were never seen again. Storms rose without warning. Stars hid themselves. Currents shifted like moods. Letters written in confidence never found their way back. Names spoken at the water's edge dissolved into foam. And yet, the ships kept leaving. The contradiction of the sea reveals itself slowly. It connects worlds while swallowing identities. It promises return without assurance. It invites movement, yet demands surrender. Those who trusted it learned humility, not as defeat, but as balance. Where memory fades, the water carries echoes. This port heard many languages, all softened by wind. Farewells were brief. Long goodbyes were considered dangerous, as if attachment itself might anger the tide. Better to leave lightly, better to let the sea decide what it would remember. As night deepens, the harbor grows quieter. One by one, ships loosen their ties. Ropes slip into water without sound. Lanterns dim. Sails rise slowly, catching moonlit wind. Hulls glide outward, dark shapes merging with darker water. The river mouths breathe behind them, releasing what they have carried for centuries. Soon, only the harbor remains. Empty docks listen to their own creaking. The water smooths itself, erasing the last ripples of departure. Moonlight settles again, unbroken. The port does not mourn. It has learned that endings here are only transformations. Perhaps the Silk Road never truly ended at this shore. Perhaps it simply softened, becoming fluid, ungraspable, untraceable. Perhaps its true destination was never a place, but continuation itself. Some journeys do not conclude. They disperse. And as sleep draws nearer, the sea keeps its quiet watch. Beneath the silence, roots still unfold. Ships still move through darkness. Words, prayers, and breath travel onward, unseen. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the road goes on. It is said that some empires announced themselves with thunder, through banners raised high, through drums, through walls meant to outlast memory. And yet, in forgotten corners of the earth, there were powers that chose another way. They spoke softly, if at all. They listened. The chapter opens within vast halls carved of stone, now cooled by centuries. The ceilings arch high above, catching the faintest echoes of footsteps that no longer belong to anyone. Light enters cautiously, filtered through dust and time, tracing pale paths across worn floors. Here, even sound seems hesitant, as if unsure whether it is welcome. A question drifts gently through the stillness. Can power exist without sound? This was an empire touched by the Silk Road, shaped by its passing currents, yet remembered only in fragments. No single name remains uncontested. No anthem survived intact. Its presence is felt more than known, like pressure in the air before rain. Beneath the silence, the halls remember. Empty palaces stretch outward like paused breath. Their walls are unadorned by conquest scenes or loud declarations. Instead, subtle carvings linger. Spirals, stars, patterns that suggest watching rather than commanding. Floors are worn smooth, not by marching armies, but by waiting. By years of people standing still, listening. Seals lie abandoned in alcoves, their impressions faded. Banners once dyed in deep color now hang as pale ghosts, edges frayed,
simple softened beyond recognition. Nothing here demands attention. Everything invites patience.
Some believe the rulers of this empire valued listening over proclamation, that their strength lay not in forcing the world to bend, but in observing how it already moved. Trade flowed through their lands like water through reeds. Ideas arrived, rested briefly, then continued onward, subtly changed. The empire did not interrupt. Beneath the silence, decisions were made slowly. Messengers arrived and were not rushed. Councils gathered without spectacle. Records were kept sparingly, as though too much certainty might distort truth. The rulers understood that what is spoken loudly is often remembered incorrectly, while what is observed carefully leaves quieter, deeper marks. Spiritual undertones hum through the ruins. Shrines are tucked into corners rather than centered. Offerings were modest: oil lamps, bowls of grain, stones marked by the moon. The belief lingered that wisdom arrived only when space was made for it, that silence itself was a form of devotion. As layers unfold, mystery deepens. The empire influenced trade routes, shaped customs, eased the passage of languages and belief. And yet, when historians search for it, they find only echoes, a reference in another's chronicle, a borrowed symbol on distant pottery, a law reflected faintly in places far beyond its borders. Contradictions gather like dust. How could something so present leave so little behind? How could influence travel so far without carrying a name? Some suggest the absence is the clue, that the empire's restraint was deliberate. Power exercised quietly leaves fewer scars. Authority that listens does not need monuments. Where memory fades, intention may still linger. It is said that armies passed through these lands without battle, that conflicts dissolved into negotiation, that refugees found space to rest without being claimed. The empire's borders were porous, flexible, more idea than line. Silence was not weakness here. It was strategy. As centuries shifted, louder powers rose and fell nearby. Their ruins are dramatic, unmistakable. This empire, by contrast, thinned gently into time. Its halls emptied, its seals lost purpose, its banners surrendered to dust. And yet, something endured. As the halls fade deeper into shadow, the air grows heavy with stillness. The echo of footsteps dissolves completely. What remains is a hush that feels intentional, held, almost protective. Perhaps this empire survives precisely because it chose silence, because it allowed history to pass through rather than be held, because it understood that control tightens and breaks, while listening adapts. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as the final light withdraws from the stone, the empire rests, not forgotten, that unclaimed, waiting quietly, as it always did.
It is said that history remembers voices that speak loudly and forgets those that move softly through the world. Yet in forgotten corners of the earth, at the edge of dawn where night loosens its hold, a solitary figure walks. The light is pale and new. The ground is cool. Each step presses briefly into the dust, leaving a shape that lingers just long enough to be noticed, then disappears. The traveler carries no banner, no seal, no written proof of having been here at all. A question rises gently with the sun. How many lives shaped the world without ever being named? This chapter is not about a single person, but about countless ones. The unnamed travelers of the Silk Road, those who pass through history like breath through cloth, essential and unseen. They walked where maps were uncertain and borders porous. They crossed deserts before roads had names, and cities before walls were finished. Beneath the silence, the road remembers them. The traveler moves onward, always at the edge of things. At dawn, they leave the shelter of a city whose gates are still half asleep. By nightfall, they rest beyond its memory. They pass through bazaars without lingering, caravansaries without carving initials into stone. They listen more than they speak. Some believe anonymity was not an accident, but a devotion. Without a name, the traveler belongs everywhere and nowhere. They are not bound to reputation or lineage. No expectation weighs upon their shoulders except survival and movement. In this freedom, humility becomes a kind of prayer. The road accepts them easily. Through cities, the traveler becomes part of the background, another shadow among many. They carry bundles not marked by ownership, letters sealed for others, spices counted by hands that will never know their source, fragments of knowledge passed quietly from place to place, scrolls wrapped in cloth, remedies memorized and adjusted, directions given without credit. History rarely pauses to notice such movement, yet it depends upon it. Beneath the silence, the traveler continues. Across deserts, their presence thins. Wind erases their path as quickly as it forms. The traveler learns to read absence, where water once was, where stars shift just enough to suggest direction. At night, they sleep lightly, trusting the earth more than walls. In these spaces, anonymity deepens into something sacred. To be unnamed is to be unburdened by permanence. The traveler does not need to be remembered to know they have mattered.
Contradictions surface gently, like stars emerging one by one. History celebrates kings, conquerors, merchants whose names echo across centuries. Yet their triumphs were carried on the backs of the unnamed. It was the quiet travelers who stitched the world together, who ensured survival, continuity, exchange. They delivered messages that altered empires and food that sustained strangers. Then they vanished. No statues honor them, no chronicles preserve their faces. Where memory fades, their influence remains. Some whispers tell us that these travelers understood something others did not, that to leave no trace was a form of mastery. To pass through without claiming was to move in harmony with the world's deeper rhythm. Dust does not resist the wind. Water does not argue with its course. The traveler learns this lesson slowly, step by step. Through mountain passes, their breath grows shallow. The air strips away excess thought. Names feel heavy here, unnecessary. Peaks do not ask who you are, only whether you listen. The traveler leaves small offerings in cracks of stone, not for recognition, but gratitude. In ports where land dissolves into water, they watch ships depart without imagining themselves aboard. Their role is not to arrive, but to ensure arrival is possible. They hand over cargo, stories, directions, then step back into the crowd until they are no longer distinguishable from it. Anonymity becomes a kind of belonging. As years pass, the traveler does not age in memory. There is no record of their beginning or end, only the quiet certainty that they were here, briefly, and that something moved because of them. Perhaps the greatest contradiction of all is this, that what is most essential often leaves the least evidence. As the journey nears its close, the light grows softer. The traveler walks once more at dawn, their shadows stretching thin across the ground. The dust receives their steps, then releases them. The world does not pause. The traveler does not look back. They disappear into the brightness ahead, not swallowed, not erased, but completed. Their task finished not by recognition, but by continuation. Others will walk where they walked,
Others will carry what they carried, unaware of whose hands shaped the path. The listener is left with a quiet reverence. Perhaps not being remembered is not a loss, but a sacred completion. Perhaps some lives are meant to dissolve into the flow of things, becoming indistinguishable from the road itself. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And somewhere beyond the light, the traveler walks on, unnamed, essential, eternal. It is said that when the last footstep fades, a road does not vanish, it listens. At dawn, an empty path stretches across the earth, pale and quiet beneath a sky still undecided between night and day. No caravans stir the dust, no bells soften the air. The land rests in a stillness so complete it feels deliberate, as if the world itself has paused to remember how to breathe. This was once the Silk Road. Not as it appears on maps, not as it is recited in names and dates, but as it feels when all movement has withdrawn. The question lingers gently, like a breath held just before sleep. Where do roads rest when footsteps cease? The path bears no markings now. Wind has smoothed its surface. Grass has learned where to grow. Stones have settled into patience. And yet, beneath the silence, something remains alert. The road has not ended. It has folded inward. Some believe decline arrives loudly, through collapse, fire, and forgetting. But here, decline came softly. Empires loosened their grip. Borders shifted like sand. Routes bent toward new centers, new waters, new winds. The great movement slowed, then thinned, then dispersed. Silence returned. Yet silence, as the road teaches, is never empty. Beneath the quiet, the Silk Road persisted, not as passage, but as memory. It folded into the way people thought about distance and connection, into the habits of exchange, into the assumption that ideas could travel, that faith could cross mountains, that strangers might meet without war.
In forgotten corners of the earth, the road learned to hide. Its stones became foundations for cities that no longer remembered why they stood where they did. Its rest points became shrines, then ruins, then open ground where children played, unaware of what once passed beneath their feet. Caravanserais dissolved into dust, but their shape lingered in the rhythm of hospitality. Food offered, water shared, silence respected. The road moved inward. Languages still carry its echoes. Words borrowed long ago remain, slightly altered, naturalized into places they never originated. Rituals retain gestures whose meanings are no longer explained. Spices flavor meals far from where they were first gathered. Music bends toward scales shaped by distant listening. What is forgotten continues to shape the present. This is the contradiction the Silk Road leaves us. Absence does not mean erasure. Memory does not require witnesses. Even when unseen, paths endure as patterns of thought, of longing, of movement toward the other. Beneath the silence, connection breathes.
Some whispers tell us that the road chose this ending, that it withdrew from sight because visibility was no longer necessary. That once the world learned its lesson, that movement could be sacred, that exchange could be gentle, it stepped back, allowing others to believe they had invented these truths on their own. Perhaps it was never meant to be preserved intact. Perhaps roads, like teachings, must eventually dissolve to remain alive. The final layers gather softly. We remember that the Silk Road was never one road. It was many moments aligned, many choices to continue, many pauses before dawn.
Its true substance was not stone or sand, but attention. And attention does not disappear. It waits. Now there are no caravans, no voices rising with morning light. The air is still, the path is empty, and yet the feeling remains that if one were to walk slowly enough, listen deeply enough, the ground might respond. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The Silk Road rests now, folded into memory, into instinct, into the quiet human understanding that we are never as separate as we believe. It has become invisible, not gone, a presence without form, a road without demand, marked by the moon, buried in dust, alive in silence. And as sleep approaches, the path remains, waiting, gently, for those who remember how to hear it.
And now the caravans have disappeared beyond the horizon. Their bells no longer sound, their paths gently erased by time. The empires along the Silk Road sleep once more, their cities quiet, their stories drifting like starlight into the night. As this journey comes to rest, may your thoughts grow lighter, your breathing deeper, and your mind at ease. Thank you for wandering through history with Twilight Tale. If this story brought you comfort, you may let it carry you further into rest. Until we meet again in another quiet moment of the past, good night and sleep peacefully.